Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the road leading to your village didn't exist 5 years ago. Now there's a smooth highway, a brand new bridge crosses the river, a modern railway carries people and goods across the country. The local market is busier than ever. For many people, that sounds like progress. But then someone asks a simple question: who paid for all of this? The answer often leads to one country: China. Over the last 2 decades, China has spent hundreds of billions of dollars building roads, railways, ports, airports, power plants, factories, and stadiums across Africa. Some people call it the greatest development partnership Africa has ever seen. Others call it a dangerous debt trap. Meanwhile, countries from Europe and North America, the powers that shaped much of Africa's modern history, are watching closely. They still invest billions on the continent. They still provide aid. They still influence politics, trade, and security. But today, they face a competitor unlike any before. This isn't a war fought with tanks. There are no missiles, no soldiers marching across borders. Instead, the weapons are money, infrastructure, trade, technology, diplomacy, and influence. Welcome to one of the biggest geopolitical stories of the 21st century, a story that stretches from the busy ports of East Africa to the copper mines of South Africa, to the oil fields of West Africa, and into the meeting rooms where presidents, business leaders, and foreign diplomats negotiate deals worth billions of dollars. But here's the question that matters most. Is Africa finally getting the investment it has always deserved, or is the continent becoming the prize in a new global competition between China and the West? The answer isn't as simple as many headlines make it seem, because this story isn't about heroes and villains. It's about power, opportunity, history, and the difficult choices facing more than 1.4 billion Africans today. To understand what's happening now, we have to go back to a time when China wasn't a global superpower, a time when Africa itself was fighting for freedom, because the roots of today's battle were planted decades ago. And that's where our story begins. To understand why China's rise in Africa has attracted so much attention, we first need to look at the decades before China became a major player. For much of the late 1800s and early 1900s, many African countries were under European colonial rule. Colonial governments built some railways, roads, and ports, but these were often designed to move raw materials such as minerals, rubber, cocoa, cotton, and other resources to ships bound for Europe. When many African countries gained independence in the 1950s and 1960s, they inherited new flags and new governments, but they also inherited economies that often depended on exporting raw materials while importing finished goods. Building strong economies from that starting point was never going to be easy. Many countries needed better roads, reliable electricity, schools, hospitals, and industries. They also needed money to build them. During the decades that followed, Western countries, including the United States and many European nations, became Africa's main foreign partners. They invested in businesses. They provided development aid. They supported health and education programs. International financial institutions, such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, also became major lenders to African governments. These loans helped fund development projects, but they often came with conditions. Governments were sometimes asked to reduce public spending, privatize state-owned companies, remove trade barriers, or introduce economic reforms before receiving financial support. Supporters argued these reforms would create stronger, more stable economies. Critics said they were sometimes introduced too quickly, leading to job losses, cuts in public services, and economic hardship for ordinary people. Across Africa, opinions were divided. Some countries experienced periods of economic growth. Others struggled with debt, political instability, or falling prices for the commodities they depended on. For millions of Africans, daily life remained difficult. In many places, electricity was unreliable. Roads connected only a few major cities. Farmers struggled to transport crops to markets. Businesses paid high costs to move goods. Large infrastructure projects often took years to secure funding. As the world entered the 21st century, Africa's need for investment was enormous. And then another country began looking at Africa very differently. While many Western governments focused heavily on aid, governance, and policy reforms, China increasingly focused on something else: building. Roads, railways, ports, power stations, factories, projects that people could see with their own eyes. For many African leaders, that approach was hard to ignore. China wasn't just promising development, it was arriving with engineers, construction companies, and financing. The balance of global influence was beginning to change, and few people realized just how quickly it would happen. By the early 2000s, China's economy was growing at an incredible pace. Its factories were producing goods for the entire world. Its cities were expanding. Millions of people were joining the middle class. But rapid growth created a new challenge. China needed huge amounts of oil, copper, iron ore, cobalt, timber, and other raw materials to keep its economy moving. Many of those resources could be found in Africa. At the same time, African countries needed something China had in abundance: money, construction companies, engineers, and the ability to complete large infrastructure projects quickly. It seemed like a perfect match. Unlike many Western countries, China often presented itself as a partner that would not interfere in a country's internal politics. Chinese leaders said every nation should choose its own path without outside pressure. That message appealed to many African governments. Instead of long negotiations over political reforms, discussions often focused on practical projects. What do you need? A highway? A railway? A dam? A power plant? Let's build it. The results soon became visible across the continent. In Ethiopia, new industrial parks and modern rail connections helped improve transport between the capital and the nearby port in neighboring Djibouti. In Kenya, a new railway linked the port city of Mombasa with the capital Nairobi, cutting travel times for passengers and freight. In Nigeria, Chinese companies helped build and modernize railway lines connecting major cities. Across countries including Angola, Zambia, Egypt, and South Africa, Chinese-backed projects appeared in transport, energy, mining, telecommunications, and manufacturing. The pace surprised many observers. Projects that had been discussed for years were finally breaking ground. For many local communities, these projects brought real improvements. Some people found jobs during construction. Businesses gained better roads to move their products. Travel became faster. Electricity reached areas that had long struggled with power shortages. New ports and railways helped countries trade more efficiently. For supporters of China's approach, the evidence was visible. You could drive on the roads, ride the trains, see the bridges, walk through the airports. But not everyone was convinced. Large projects required large loans, and loans, no matter who provides them, eventually have to be repaid. As borrowing increased, economists, journalists, and political leaders began asking difficult questions. How much debt was too much? Were all these projects financially sustainable? Would they generate enough economic growth to repay the money? Or could today's development become tomorrow's financial burden?
Those questions would soon place China's role in Africa under intense global scrutiny, because building impressive infrastructure is only one part of the story. Paying for it is another.
As Chinese-funded projects spread across Africa, another number started growing alongside them: debt. Building a railway, a highway, or a major power plant costs billions of dollars. Most governments cannot pay that amount up front, so they borrow the money and repay it over many years. China became one of Africa's largest bilateral lenders, financing thousands of projects across the continent. For many leaders, this was exactly what they needed. Without financing, many of these projects might never have been built. But borrowing always comes with risk. Imagine taking out a loan to start a business. If the business succeeds, you repay the loan and make a profit. If the business fails, the debt remains. Countries face a similar challenge. A railway or port only pays for itself if it helps the economy grow enough to cover its costs. If trade slows, government income falls, or the project doesn't perform as expected, repaying the loan becomes much harder. For many African governments, this became a difficult balancing act. They wanted modern infrastructure to boost their economies, but they also needed to make sure future generations wouldn't be overwhelmed by debt. This wasn't just China's challenge. It was the reality of financing development anywhere in the world. Still, because China was funding so many high-profile projects, attention quickly turned toward Beijing. Journalists, economists, and politicians began asking tough questions. Were these loans helping Africa build its future or creating new financial risks? That question would soon become one of the most heated debates in global politics. One phrase began appearing in newspapers, television debates, and political speeches around the world: debt trap diplomacy. According to this idea, China was lending large sums of money to poorer countries, knowing some might struggle to repay. Critics argued that this could give Beijing greater political influence or leverage. It's a claim that has received enormous attention, but the evidence is more complicated. Many researchers have found limited evidence that China deliberately lends money with the goal of taking control of infrastructure when countries cannot repay. Instead, debt problems often result from a combination of factors: global economic shocks, falling commodity prices, domestic financial decisions, and borrowing from many different lenders. In fact, many African countries owe money to private investors, international financial institutions, other governments, and their own domestic lenders, not just China. That doesn't mean there are no concerns. Some Chinese-funded projects have been criticized for their high costs, lack of transparency, environmental impacts, or for creating fewer local jobs than expected. Others, however, have transformed transport, increased access to electricity, and supported economic growth. The reality is that China's investments have not produced the same results everywhere. Some projects have been clear successes. Others have struggled to meet expectations. For ordinary Africans, the debate is often much simpler than the headlines. If a new road helps a farmer reach the market, if a railway lowers transport costs, if reliable electricity helps a small business grow, many people see those projects as worthwhile. But if debt rises while everyday life doesn't improve, support can quickly fade. As this debate intensified, the West realized something important. China was no longer just another investor in Africa. It had become a major geopolitical rival. And the response from Washington and European capitals was about to reshape the competition once again.
So, after everything we've seen, who is actually winning this battle for Africa? Is it China? Is it the West? Or is it Africa itself? The honest answer is that the story is still being written. There is no doubt that China's presence has changed Africa. Across the continent, new highways, railways, ports, airports, and power stations have transformed the landscape. In many places, journeys that once took an entire day now take only a few hours. Businesses can move goods more quickly. Some communities have gained access to electricity and better transport for the first time. For millions of people, those improvements are real. At the same time, concerns about debt, transparency, and the long-term economic value of some projects have not disappeared. Every major loan carries responsibility, and every government must decide whether today's investment will still benefit its people decades from now. The West, meanwhile, has not stepped away from Africa. Instead, it has adapted. The United States and European countries continue to invest in trade, technology, healthcare, education, clean energy, and security partnerships. They argue that long-term development depends not only on infrastructure, but also on strong institutions, accountable governments, and sustainable economic growth. China argues that it delivers what African countries ask for: roads, bridges, railways, factories, and power plants, without telling governments how to run their internal affairs. These two approaches are different, but they are now competing on the same continent. And that competition has given many African countries something they have rarely had before: a choice. For perhaps the first time in decades, many governments can negotiate with multiple global powers instead of relying on just one. But with greater opportunity comes greater responsibility, because the decisions made today could shape Africa for generations. And that's where the real story begins.
History has taught one important lesson. No foreign country, whether from the East or the West, will care more about Africa's future than Africans themselves. Every nation pursues its own interests. China does. The United States does. European countries do. That is the nature of international politics. The real challenge for Africa is not choosing between China and the West. It is making sure every partnership creates jobs, develops local industries, transfers skills, strengthens local businesses, and improves the lives of ordinary people. If that happens, competition between global powers could become one of Africa's greatest opportunities. If it doesn't, the continent risks remaining a supplier of raw materials while others capture most of the value. The choices African leaders make today will influence the continent's economy, industries, technology, and global standing for decades to come. So perhaps the biggest question isn't whether China will defeat the West and Africa, or whether the West will regain its influence. Perhaps the real question is this: can Africa use this moment to build a future on its own terms? The answer won't be decided in Beijing. It won't be decided in Washington. And it won't be decided in Brussels. It will be decided by Africans, in government, in business, in local communities, and by millions of ordinary people working to shape the continent's future. Because in the end, this has never really been China's story, or the West's. It has always been Africa's. If you enjoyed this documentary, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe China's growing role is creating new opportunities for Africa? Or do you think the West remains Africa's strongest long-term partner? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more documentaries exploring Africa's history, politics, and future. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.